Imposter syndrome. Have you ever had it? And if you have, what did you do? If you haven't, how do you make sure that you don't feel like an imposter? Spring, go ahead.
Oh, yes. I've definitely had it, and I still do. I still have things come up that I'm like, oh my gosh, can I do that? Right. And even a couple of days ago, you guys, I had an opportunity and I was like, no way. The reality of it is every time that comes up, I just think about, why not me? Just to your point that you said, like, why not me? Why can't I do that? The only thing that's holding me back is myself. And I always also say to myself, I'll take a step back and look at it from a third party. And I think, well, at least I'm getting in the arena. And the only reason we have imposter syndrome is because we feel like we're being judged by other people. And so for me, I'm like, I'll always take a step back and say, at least I'm putting myself in the arena. And if somebody's going to judge me, if I'm going to quote unquote fail, at least I'm the one who tried and put myself out there. So every time I feel it, that's exactly what happens. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go for it and release expectations, and we'll see how it plays out.
It's giving yourself permission to fail.
Mm-hmm.
I think like a key thing that you're saying, is that fair to say?
Yeah. And I don't even believe it is failure because I'm at least trying. I don't even believe in myself of failing. Like, I have a lot of things going on right now. Failure is only in the eye of what expectation you're putting out there. So maybe I want to have an event that I have 1,000 people show up, but I have 500. Well, nobody knew I wanted 1,000 people. I have 500. So I just look at it as like, you've got to go out there, you've got to try, release expectations, do your best. And at least you're putting yourself out there, because there's a lot of people that aren't. And you're just moving one step forward to your goals.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Spring.
Mm-hmm.
Elena, over to you.
Yes. As Spring said, I think a lot of us, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but yeah, for myself, certainly I felt like, wow, I have this expectation that I'm supposed to feel a certain way, or always feel confident, or know what I'm doing. And somehow, because I have insecurities or whatever, that labels inside my head that I must be an imposter. But I really analyze this, because you're right, this does come up a lot. And so I realized, look, pretty much as a generality, we all feel the same way. And then I looked at it even further, and what is that exactly? Like, if you're an imposter, you're posing as something that isn't actually to be, right? Like, if you're claiming that you're some self-expert in an area and you're not, you're actually a fraud, right? But there's nothing wrong with claiming something and saying, this is where I'm at. I'm a brand new realtor. I've only been a realtor for 2 years, but I'm not an imposter. I'm learning. I'm self-educating. I'm surrounding myself by the right people. I'm guiding people. I'm not pretending to be something that I'm not. However, I'm not stopping what I want to do based on my own insecurities. You know what I'm saying? So I feel this imposter thing is like, look, you take a gold medalist, an athlete, even the professionals are going to doubt themselves or hit a plateau. You're constantly trying to become better than where you're at. So you're always going to feel in this situation in life that you're not there yet, or where you want to be. But that doesn't discredit how much time and energy you've already put in. Like, you're constantly gonna evolve. So give yourself permission to evolve, and just know that other people are experiencing their own insecurities. But if you just continue to, have courage in the face of fear to keep putting that next foot forward, you're not an imposter. You're just experiencing the growth of what it means to expand yourself in that role.
Well said. Very well said. I remember reading a study some time ago in which women are more often to not apply for a job because it's a stretch versus men. And I don't know if that still holds true. But what I love about what you said is, wait a second, take a step back. You're not supposed to, like, first of all, we're not pretending that we are something that we are absolutely not. Like, I'm an accountant. Let me do your taxes for you. I'm not fraud, right? So we have to, like, break apart this notion of imposter syndrome from, like, actual real fraud, right? So number one. And then number two, make sure that first of all, acknowledge other people feel the same way and understand that you're stretching yourself. And that's just part of what it feels like to stretch yourself. And like I said earlier, many men apply for that role, and that's expected. It's expected for you to be stretching yourself in a role that you don't have all of the skill sets. Otherwise, how do you grow into that role? It doesn't make sense. You always stay here. Thank you so much. Awesome. Yeah. Kathleen, you're next. Then Nikki and Michelle.
Yeah, I mean, I love this so much. And I want to take a bit of a, in high performance, we think the opposite is like laziness or apathy, and it's not. The opposite of high performance is toxicity. It's enablement. And we're in a culture or an industry where there is toxicity. I mean, there are imposters, there's pretenders, and then there's performers. And right. I think we need to think about this for a second. The pretenders that are operating in toxicity, they aren't suffering from imposter syndrome. They aren't worrying, do I have enough? Imposters don't think about, am I credible enough? They're just showing up with entitlement. And it's really important to identify this, right? Actions not matching words, which is something as leaders we always need to look for. But the highest performance leaders, they leverage imposter syndrome to their advantage. I'm thankful that I have personal inventory that I say, could I do better? Could I learn more? Do I have the skills and the equipment? The market has shifted. Am I humble enough to educate myself at a higher level? Thank goodness I have that personal inventory to see those gaps and keep getting better. I think the problem is when we don't give ourselves enough regard for the skills that we do have in relation to the gaps that we need to fill. But I don't know where I'd be, let alone any leader I've ever worked with, without imposter syndrome. I think it's a very, very healthy aspect that we have to our personas that really helps us grow. And without it, I think leadership might be a scary place, to be honest.
So I like that switch. It's like lean into the feeling and leverage it, right? Kind of like lean into that fear and do it anyway. Like lean into the feeling and let that be a leading indicator as to how you can improve. Awesome.
Well, yeah. And well, for sure. Like, I think when we're starting out, like it never goes away. When I first started coaching, I look back now, I'm like, what did I know? Why did anyone pay me? Meanwhile, we had great results, but now I still feel that way. What else do I need to know? And I mean, that gap just keeps propelling us. But I think it's good to know, like, if we didn't have it, I'd be worried. I'm worried when I don't have it. When I have it, I'm thankful.
Again, to your point, in this world in which everyone is constantly evolving their careers, everyone is constantly evolving the brand, doing something next, you have to evolve. And having that sense of imposter syndrome can help you be nimble in another way, and continue to learn and continue to do better. Nikki, over to you.
I mean, to everyone's point, I'm right on track with that I always say, like, before I was just speaking at a really large event. There was about 8,000 people there. Before we got out on stage, somebody backstage was like, are you nervous right now? Like, do you get nervous still before you go and do this? And I always say I am nervous, not in the sense that I'm nervous to go and speak in front of everyone, but I'm nervous in the sense that I have an obligation, if everyone chose to spend their time here today, for this hour keynote that I have, that I deliver, right? And so some might call that imposter syndrome, but from my perspective, we're always an imposter of something that we have never done before. So theoretically, we will constantly be an imposter if we are evolving our lives, right? If we are continuing to push forward, if we are continuing to push the boundaries of what we're capable of. And I found that the more I got into rooms with high achievers, I realized exactly what everyone has said, that like we all feel this. Nobody really knows what they're doing. We're sort of all making this up as we go, right? And we're all figuring it out as we go. And so I made a decision, to Spring's point earlier about failure, right? A lot of times I think we get imposter syndrome around failure, right? Like that whether we failed at something or whether we're actually succeeding. And I made a decision a long time ago that I could never fail. Like failure just wasn't an option for me, in the sense that the only way I describe failure is if I quit or if I never really find out what I'm capable of. Otherwise, I'm just in the middle of succeeding, because success has a whole lot to do with when we time the outcome. Like if you time my business right now to what I envision it being 5 years from now, sure, I'm absolutely failing in comparison with where I will be then, but I'm not going to quit. So in my world, I absolutely can't fail. So I think this is how we define it too. And to everybody's point, if we can lean into the growth, if we can lean into the evolution, then that imposter syndrome starts to quiet, because we realize that it's just part of how we become who we want to become.
Nikki, that's great. I love the idea of, like, a mental hack would be extend the timeline. Like, you think you got to be here right now? You don't. Extend the timeline out and understand that the process to get there, that famous iceberg, have you seen that, is a bunch of chaos before you get to that particular piece, that particular outcome. Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Nikki. Michelle, I saw you kind of laughing and like nodding your head. I'm so curious. What were you thinking?
I resonated with everything every one of these women have shared. And it's interesting. So when I started with my intro, you kind of picked up on the imposter syndrome. It's definitely something that I have battled and was challenged by for most of my life. And I've spent many years really kind of diving in and dissecting it and why. And the reality is this: I was being an imposter because me coming into the business, trying to be like somebody else that I thought was this ideal image, pretending to be that I had these strengths. Like, I'm the first to say now, and I'm quite happy to say it, don't talk to me about numbers. I'm not the numbers person. You want to know creativity. You want me to listen and be able to respond. I can do that with power and passion, but numbers, okay, I can do it. I'm just laughing, joking, but
of course.
But do I want to? Is that really where my strengths are? Is that where my blueprint is? And so for me, being able to really overcome the imposter syndrome and recognizing that it really doesn't ever go away, to all these other women's points, being able to navigate it and manage it really centered around me getting clear on who am I? It's great to, if we sit here and we say, well, what is this identity of success? Like, who comes to mind? For me, for the longest time, it was always somebody who was very assertive and tough and unemotional and, could make very clear, logical decisions. And here I am, emotional. I like relationships. I want to connect with people. I need to understand a deeper level. And so there was a huge gap between who I was and who I thought I needed to be. And in my experience, the larger the gap, the greater those feelings of imposter syndrome. And so for me to be able to close that gap for myself, it really had to come down to, who am I? And how can I leverage that? And how do I use that as a strength in my business? How do I show up as the best version of me, as opposed to trying to chase a version that isn't like me? And so, it kind of sums up everything that everybody has shared. It doesn't go away. It's always going to be there. It's a response to fear. Fear is not always a bad thing. It's putting yourselves in new situations, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. But for me, it really came down to recognizing, where am I not aligned with who I am and what I want and what I value and how I can show up and serve people, because that's going to look very different than somebody else might.
And I think when we're younger, that's what we want to do. We want to fit in. We want to be like everybody else. We want to emulate those that we think are the pinnacle of success. And in doing so, we get lost. And then we reinforce the sensation of being a fraud in that particular circumstance. I think there's a great saying, be yourself, everybody else is taken.
Exactly.
And that's something to remember.